So in this section, what we are going to deal with is enhancing sensory perception. Also the idea that we can use our perception and our experiences through the five senses to create balance inside the body. I'd like to go back to the basic notion that our body is part of the body of the universe. That basic expression, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. And everything that happens in the universe ultimately results in what we can call biological rhythms in the body. So as the earth moves on its own axis, we have the cycle of night and day, which results in very profound changes in our physiology. As the earth moves around the sun, the cycles of the seasons, the tides cause ebb and flow in our physiology. Even the relationship of the sun, earth and moon as they move in relation to each other results in biological cycles in us, 28-day cycles. The human menstrual cycle is a good example of that, but there are many other 28-day cycles. You can give an animal a certain dose of radiation at 4 o'clock in the morning, it may kill him. Give the same dose of radiation at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it may have a beneficial effect. The reason is the body has completely changed in that 12-hour period. So the body is always changing, and it is trying to synchronize its rhythms with the rhythms of the universe. So the signal that comes to us when we are out of harmony with the universal rhythm is the sense of discomfort, whether it's physical, emotional, intellectual. So all techniques that we're going to talk about now are to resynchronize the body's rhythms with the rhythms of the universe. And we do that through our five senses also. What is sensory experience other than taking in information from the universe and then matching it with the information inside this universe, which is my body. My body is a whole universe within itself. And sensory experience is just taking information from the universe outside my skin into the universe inside my skin and matching intelligence with intelligence. So let's start with sound. If we understand the quantum mechanical framework well, then we realize that the body is in fact nothing other than vibration. Vibrations in the unified field which result in the molecules that make up the body. So the body is ultimately just vibration. And the vibration of the body has to match the vibrations that make up the universe. And this matching or locking in or falling into a rhythmic relationship with, it's called entrainment. E-N-T-R-A-I-N-M-E-N-T. To entrain with means to establish a rhythmic relationship with something. Entrainment was first described by a physicist named Itzhak Bentov. He did a very interesting experiment with clocks. He had 5 clocks. Each of them had a pendulum about the same size. He started the pendulums swinging at different times, not synchronously. But when he waited for about 4 hours or so, then what happened was the penduli gradually started swinging to the same rhythm. You can do this experiment any number of times, and you'll find that even though you start the pendulums swinging at different times, after a while they all start swinging to the same rhythm. And this phenomenon is called entrainment, falling into rhythmic relationship with each other. I'll give you another example of it. You take a baby and put it next to its mother's breast. After a while, the baby's heart rate will entrain with the mother's heart rate. In other words, there'll be a rhythmic relationship between the two. It may not be the same rate, but there's a relationship. The baby's breathing will entrain with the mother's breathing also. And in fact, when you agree with somebody or disagree with somebody, what's happening is entrainment or falling out of entrainment. When I agree with you, because my thoughts are stimulating the same quantum fields in my awareness, then my breathing spontaneously matches your breathing, and so on. If you have a lot of women living together, you'll find that after a while, their menstrual cycles will entrain with each other. They'll all have their menstrual periods about the same time. So entrainment is a universal phenomenon, and it begins at the moment of conception. A baby's rhythms start entraining with cosmic rhythms through the physiology of the mother. And then they keep doing that right through pregnancy, and then even after a baby is born, it needs the proximity to its mother to have this entrainment continue. And the entrainment is through all the five senses. We can take any one of the senses and see how that happens. For example, sound can entrain our body's rhythms with universal rhythms. Music can do that also. Now, in the last few years, there's been a lot of research on this. It's become obvious that music can influence the heart rate of a person, brain waves, blood pressure, stomach contractions, levels of hormones that are associated with stress, with immunity, can be influenced through music. Also, there are secretions in our body known as endorphins, which are the body's natural opiates, which means the body's natural morphine-like compounds that are secreted when we listen to music that we enjoy. And therefore, when we are enjoying a certain piece of music, actually there are certain chemical changes occurring in the body. In fact, you can block the pleasure of music that a person gets by giving them an injection of something called Narcan, which is a narcotic antagonist, which means that when we are listening to music and enjoying it, then in fact we are generating some very powerful chemical messengers, the neuropeptides, and these are healing chemicals. They're the body's pharmacy. In the last few years, there's been some research which shows that different kinds of music will have different kinds of effects on the body. For example, high-pitched music will create a playful and happy mood, but also will speed up the metabolism. So high-pitched music, for example, would therefore be much more appropriate for a kapha type, because the kapha body type is hypometabolic, slow. If he hears high-pitched music, or if he hears music that has faster rhythm to it, that will increase his metabolism. On the other hand, low-pitched music slows down the body's metabolism. So it would be very useful, for example, in a vata type of person, to listen to a low-pitched music, also to music which has a slower rhythm to it. So slow and quiet music will bring about changes in the body that are the opposite of a hypermetabolic status. It's also been found, for example, that music played in post-surgical patients after surgery will decrease the need for pain medicines or for tranquilizers, and also hasten the recovery of a patient after surgery. And now music therapy is standardly used in various clinics to treat depression, migraine, anxiety, isolation and burn victims, also treatment of post-coronary patients, organ transplant patients, also after heart attacks. So this is already becoming standard therapy. This Ayurvedic knowledge helps us in many ways. And one of those is the whole notion that if we can introduce a vibrational sound in our body that resonates in all the cells of our body, that will facilitate or improve what we call entrainment, this falling into a rhythmic relationship with. Let me give you some examples of what are called tonal or vibrational sounds. These are sounds that vibrate in all the cells of the body. Traditionally, these are all the sounds of all the alphabets in all the languages. All the universal languages have more or less the same sounds to the alphabets. And if you take the vowels of these alphabets, the vowels are vibrational sounds. So let me give you an example of that. Ah, that's the sound of a vowel. Or a, or e, any of the vowels. Just take a deep breath, and then as you exhale, you make the sound of the vowel. And in English, of course, the vowels are A, E, I, O, U. So any of those vowels can be used to immediately cause a vibration in all the cells of our body. And when we do that, then what we do is we literally shake the cells, and as a result of vibrating the cells, they begin to entrain with each other, and they begin to train with other rhythms. So that's a way of restoring biological rhythm. There are other sounds, which are also sounds from the alphabet, that resonate in different parts of the body. The sound hum, for example, resonates mainly in the lungs. And again, the way you make it is you take a deep breath, hum. That sound resonates in the lungs. It also resonates in the sinuses. It also resonates in the skull. The sound na, which is the sound of N, resonates in the eardrums. So again, what you do is you touch the back of your front teeth with your tongue, and then you make the sound of N, the alphabet N. So it's something like this. When you do that, you should be able to feel the resonance in the ears. This sound is used as a healing sound for people who have even mild degrees of deafness, or tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears, or in fact just to cause that resonance in the ears to sharpen one's sense of hearing. The sound ma, which is the sound of M, which is the alphabet M, resonates mainly in the sinus cavities. So or ma. This sound resonates in the sinus cavities, and therefore is very useful for people who are more prone to sinus infections or sinus headaches. The sound of Y, which is the letter Y I'm talking about, ya, you, ye, it mainly moves the temporomandibular joints. Ya, you, ye. As you make that sound, your jaw moves, this joint moves. And as a result, this is very useful for people who have, for example, headaches or migraine from what is known as temporomandibular joint disease. It's a common syndrome that occurs in Vata types. When they are very hyper anxious, nervous, they tend to clench their teeth. So using this sound, ya, you, ye, loosens this joint. And not only will it loosen the joint, it will get rid of the headache, but more important, it will even get rid of the tension that comes, because the tension creates the tightness then reinforces the tension. So if you release the tension, then the tightness gets released, and if you release the tightness, the tension gets released. The sound of laughter, which is the sound ha, it's very good for people who have indigestion, or people who are experiencing heartburn, or people who have an abnormal appetite. For example, they don't get hungry frequently enough, or they get too hungry. The sound is the sound of the letter H, and it bounces off the stomach. So, ha, 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 the sound of laughter. And in fact, if you make that sound frequently enough, then you'll even experience the emotion of laughter. Because what's an emotion? An emotion is a thought that is coupled to a physical sensation. And if you evoke the physical sensation, then the thought also comes. If you have the thought, that evokes the physical sensation. So when you join the two, you can evoke the appropriate emotion. So if you just take a deep breath and say, ha, 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 and bounce the sound off your stomach, you will experience the emotion of laughter. Now we know that when people experience emotions such as laughter, genuine laughter, then they make very powerful chemical messengers. In fact, the neuropeptides of laughter are very healing compounds. Dr. Norman Cousins has shown that laughter could be a very appropriate medicine for a number of diseases. Well, laughter as an emotion, but laughter as a sound also has the ability to generate these peptides in the body. So I've given you quite a few examples of how we can use sound not only to begin entrainment, but we can use sound to bring about resonance in different parts of the body. And if we use all these sounds, we can see that we can entrain our body as a whole, also bring about vibrational changes and therefore the appropriate chemical changes in specific parts of the body. What you do is, you take a deep breath, and then as you're exhaling, you make the appropriate sound till you run out of breath. And then as you run out of breath, you take a deep breath again, and then you repeat the whole sequence. So with each sound, you could do it, say, 3 times. And if you did all the sounds, it would take you about maybe 2-3 minutes, and you would have refreshed your whole body through vibration. So you could take a deep breath, and you could just make the sound ya, you, ye on the exhalation. You could do that 3 times, then you could switch to the sound na, or you could take all the vowels, a, e, I, o, u, and then the sound ma, or ma, ma. So all these sounds, and in fact, in the printed material included with these tapes is a list of all the sounds that one can use, and also instructions on how you can use those sounds to resonate in different parts of the body, and also what the sounds are useful for. If once we have an intellectual understanding that sound is used to create entrainment and restore a disrupted biological rhythm, I would recommend that you take each of the sounds provided on the list, and once a day, for about 5 minutes, practice the whole series, starting with the first, ending with the last. You take a deep breath and practice sounding out each one of those sounds about 3 times on the outgoing breath. If you practice these sounds regularly, and the whole procedure shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 minutes, you will experience the following changes in your physiology. Your sense of hearing will improve, because there is a sound there to resonate against the eardrum inside the ear. Your digestion will improve. As a result of the vowel sounds resonating in all the parts of the body, you will experience much more energy, and you'll feel less fatigue. And then, of course, one can use specific sounds to get rid of a headache or get rid of a nervous stomach, etc. Incidentally, all of these procedures also are very useful breathing exercises, because what you're doing is, as you take in a deep breath, then you're practicing the sound on the outgoing breath, and then you sound it out for as long as you can, and then you're forced to take a deep breath again. And therefore, the sounds open up the lungs at the same time as they improve your physiology. So they're opening up the lungs, providing increased oxygen to your body, and so on. So you feel the sense of energy and renewal just as a result of making those sounds. So this is one technique of using sound. But of course, one can also listen to music, and any music that evokes a playful, happy mood or increases a sense of buoyancy is healing music. Now, of course, traditionally in Ayurveda, there are certain frequencies that are used to balance the body's rhythms at certain times of the day. However, any music that creates that feeling of buoyancy, that feeling of cheerfulness, will create the appropriate chemical responses in the body. A little bit of music every day, listening to a little bit of music, is very refreshing and very renewing. There's research now that shows that if you listen to some sad music, say Beethoven's Funeral March, and if you listen to it long enough, then your cells start behaving as if they're going to a funeral. They start literally responding to that at the cellular level. Or if you listen to rock music, the cells become quite jittery sometimes. Of course, that may be appropriate for short periods, but over a long period, it can be quite disruptive. Classical music always results in very smooth biological functioning and the appropriate release of chemicals that are healing. So listening to music, or making the appropriate sounds, or listening to internal sounds. There's one other way you can listen to sounds. It may sound a little esoteric, but it has a scientific basis to it. You gently occlude the ears with your forefingers. So you just very gently occlude the ear canals with your forefingers, close the eyes, and just have a receptive listening attitude. And then you may be able to hear from your own awareness, from inside you, certain sounds. At times it can sound like the ringing of bells, or at other times it can sound like music. At other times there are screeching sounds. Other times there are sounds like ocean waves. It's a good monitor of how your health is, because if your health is good, the sounds that come out from inside are very pleasant sounds. If your health is not good, the sounds that come out from inside are disruptive sounds. In fact, instruments are now being developed that can amplify the sounds each organ of the body makes. Then you can amplify that, and you'll find when there is certain disease, then the sound is disrupted. There's a distortion in the natural sound that's coming. Playing the appropriate sound back to the organ will restore that distortion. So listening to the internal sounds that are generated inside our body by gently occluding the ear canals with your forefinger and just having that quiet receptive attitude will improve one's sense of hearing also. So these are some of the techniques that one can use to not only experience better sensory perception through sound, but also use sound for healing. And traditionally, in all cultures all over the world, sound has been used for healing. And they've used the same sounds, because the sounds are basically universal sounds. They form the alphabets of all the different languages. Our bodies are constantly bombarded from the environment through sound. So frequently we talk about pollution, but we fail to recognize that sound pollution is one of the important factors in inducing discomfort and also ultimately disease. For example, it's well known that loud noise amplifies aggression and can cause premature deafness and interferes with learning ability. Martial music has been traditionally used through centuries to make people go to war. So there are sounds that can evoke a host of emotional responses. And one can use the sounds to then get rid of the inappropriate emotions as well. And therefore, sound becomes a very important therapeutic tool in healing. The next sensory input that we can use to bring about changes in our physiology is the experience of sight. There's a lot of research that shows that the information that we take in through our sense of sight also very profoundly influences what's going on in the body. In fact, any sensory input that you have changes the body's chemistry in less than 1/100th of a second. So when you see something, when you hear something, when you touch something or taste something and smell something, the brain chemistry, but simultaneously the body chemistry responds to that in less than 1/100th of a second. If we knew that, then we would choose the appropriate input that could influence the chemistry in a favorable direction. There is research, for example, that when people look at a natural scene versus an urban scene, that there are different brainwave patterns. If you are out there looking at a natural scene such as a forest or a sunset or a rainbow, then your brainwave will show very distinct patterns that are quite different from the patterns that would come out if you were, say, seeing a violent crime or even an industrial plant or even a parking lot for that matter. So what you see immediately influences what's going on. And in fact, again, there are many research papers now coming out in many journals that show that our experience of sight can influence heart rate, blood pressure, stress hormones, and so on. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is go over a series of procedures that you can do with the eyes that will in fact improve your vision, improve your sense of color perception, and also allow you to experience and access different states of information in your consciousness. Because after all, through our senses, we are accessing information in that field of information, which is us. 99.99% of that empty space which makes up our body is nothing other than that field of information. And we are accessing that field of information through our senses. So let's take a series of procedures with the eyes that you can perform that will immediately result in enhanced sensory perception will improve your eyesight, will improve your sense of color perception, which gives you much more enjoyment out of life, will also improve your memory, your creativity, your attention span, and your learning ability. All these things are possible just by doing a few simple exercises with the eyes. The first one is very simple. It's looking at the sun with the eyes closed. You would stand in the sun and look towards it with the eyes closed, allowing the light to filter through the eyelids and ultimately stimulating the rods and cones of the retina, which are responsible for light perception. Now, if you don't have access to the sun because it's a cloudy day, then you can also use full spectrum light. These days, full spectrum lights are available at most light stores. Just means that they have all the different wavelengths that sunlight has. And in fact, there's some very good research from England that was published in the journal Lancet, which shows that when full spectrum lights were used in classrooms, children started learning much faster, their grades improved, and not only that, there had fewer number of winter colds, fewer number of infections in the winter. Most of the lights that are used indoors are not full spectrum lights and therefore are not really as healthy as the light that would have the full spectrum, which would be like the sun. The first exercise, simply looking at the sun with the eyes closed. This stimulates the cells of the retina so that they become more sensitive to light. The second procedure is called watching the colors, and it's a very simple thing. As you're looking towards the sun, you do that for maybe 15-20 seconds at the most. Your eyes are still closed. You gently massage the eyeballs with your fingertips, and you do that for about 15-20 seconds. After you've massaged the eyeballs, then you just gently move your head away from the sun and then back towards the sun or towards the full spectrum light, whichever you're using. And then you will experience in your awareness a whole range of colors. If you're a Pitta body type, you may experience more red. If you're a Kapha body type, you may experience more blue. If you're a Vata body type, you may experience more yellow and green. You will experience certain colors, and these colors are basically in your quantum mechanical body because you're not perceiving outside colors, your eyes are still closed, you're perceiving colors that you're generating inside. And you just hold your attention in such a way that you try and maintain the experience of those colors. So once you've experienced the colors, then try to hold the colors in your awareness. And you may be able to do it for maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds or sometimes for a minute or 2 minutes. And the colors change also. So spontaneously they may go through the full range of the spectrum, all the colors from violet to indigo to blue to green, yellow, orange, and red. So you may see that. The idea of doing this exercise is that these subtle colors in our perception stimulate those cells of the eyes, which are called cones, which are the receptors for color perception. As a result of doing this exercise, what happens is we find spontaneously, not because we're trying to, that suddenly the colors in our environment become much more alive. They become much more vibrant. They become much more powerful. Our sensory experience becomes richer as a result. We notice the colors more spontaneously. The same sunset viewed by two people could cause a completely different experience. In one person's awareness, rich, vibrant, full of color. In another person's awareness, dull. They're seeing the same thing, but if the light receptors are much more sensitive, then color becomes lively in your awareness, and that spontaneously has a healing effect also. Basically, what you've done is you've looked towards the sun or the full spectrum light for a given amount of time, 30 seconds. Then you've gently massaged the eyes while the eyes are closed, and then you've just moved the head back and forth towards the sun a few times, and then you hold the colors for as long as you can. The total time to do all the procedures that I'm going to go over will take you about 5 or 6 minutes and completely alter your sensory perception. And you do it every day. So now let's move on to some other procedures with the eyes that also are extremely useful. If you do the whole set of eye exercises, then not only can you improve your vision, but if you now have vision which is not normal, if you're short-sighted or far-sighted or have any other refractive problems, these can be corrected. You will notice as you do these procedures that after a period of time you'll need to change your lenses, and you may need to change them 3 or 4 times before you can finally discard them. So if you do these exercises regularly, you should be able to correct your vision. Ultimately, don't need any corrective aids. See, what we consider as normal in our society is many times the psychopathology of the average. And we confuse normal with average. The average is so common, so dull, so uninteresting, we don't even notice it. So when somebody comes along who has really normal sight, it appears extraordinary. With these exercises, by common standards, you may really develop extraordinary vision. The next set of procedures is for the lens of the eye. As people grow old, what happens is the lens becomes less flexible. It becomes rigid. And as a result of that, there's stagnation of fluid inside the lens that ultimately leads to densities and cataracts and so on. So by improving the flexibility, pliability, elasticity of the lens, what we can do is prevent cataracts from occurring in the future, as well as improve our vision and correct either short-sightedness or far-sightedness. There are 3 procedures that will help improve the flexibility of the lens. The first one is called focusing, and it's very simple. All you do is you look at an object which is close to you, and then you look at an object which is distant. So you could take your own hand, for example, and just hold it about a few inches in front of your eyes, maybe about 6 inches in front of your eyes, and you look at your hand, and then you look at an object in the distance. Traditionally, it used to be the horizon. So you looked at something which was 6 inches away from you, your hand, you hold it in front of you, and then you look at an object at a distance. You look again back at the object which is close to you, your hand, and then look again at distance. You do that 15, 20 times. There should be no strain, it should be simple and smooth. But as you do this, you change the focal length of the lens. And as you change the focal length of the lens, you increase its elasticity, its plasticity, its flexibility. The second thing to do to improve the flexibility of the lens is a procedure that we call distant reading. In this exercise, you take some written material. For example, the written material which is included with this tape series, and you can pin it up against the wall, and then you stand at a distance away from it as far as possible for comfortable reading. And then every day you move back just a little bit, very little bit, that will allow you to read it comfortably. And if you do that slowly enough, you will find that gradually you will be able to read it from the further distance, till ultimately you should be able to read it from even the end of the room. Many times when I go on jet planes and I'm traveling, I look at the small print in the front of the aircraft when I'm sitting at the back. And just with practice, after a while, I can read the small print in the front of the plane from the back of the plane, as a result of just doing it. The opposite of distant reading is close reading. You take the same printed material and you read it from as close a distance that you can comfortably, and then gradually bring it nearer you every day till finally you can read it even if it's against your nose. So ultimately your range of vision extends from closer than the closest to farther than the farthest. These 3 procedures, focusing, distant reading and close reading, are all very useful in improving the flexibility and pliability of the lens. You do all the procedures just once. Every single procedure should take no more than 15-20 seconds. And when you're done with all these procedures, the whole thing should take you no more than 5 minutes. And also it is important to bear in mind that if you have corrective lenses, when you do the procedures, it's best to take them off. So the next set of procedures are called fixed positions of the eyes. And these fixed positions of the eyes strengthen the extraocular muscles of the eyes. The extraocular muscles are those muscles which are responsible for movement and coordination of the eyes. Not only do they strengthen the extraocular muscles of the eyes, which is of course very important aspect of vision and also of coordination, but they also allow us to access different states of information in consciousness. And by doing that, they strengthen our memory, they strengthen our learning ability, they strengthen our attention span, and ultimately all of this leads to a much more stable physiology. So the first fixed position of the eyes is looking to the left and up. Looking to the left and up, and you hold the eyes in that fixed position for about 15 seconds or so. You look straight ahead. First you hold your head so that your eyes are pointing straight ahead, and then without moving the head, you look up and to the left. Now this movement is a movement that people spontaneously make when they are recalling a visual memory. Let's say if you ask somebody, how was the picnic and who was dressed in what colors, or what did she look like, etc. When you ask somebody that question and they're trying to recall a visual image, they spontaneously look up and to the left if they're right-handed people. And just doing this procedure, we strengthen our ability of visual recall. Looking down and to the left accesses auditory memory and auditory recall. So if you're recalling a conversation, or if you're recalling some music in your awareness, then you spontaneously usually look down and to the left. Now looking down and to the right allows us to access what is called kinesthetic recall, or the experience of touch, the memory of touch. So if you're recalling the texture of a rose petal in your awareness, then that's what you spontaneously do. Vata body types are sensitive to both touch and sound, so they tend to look down most of the time. Pitta types tend to look up, and they respond much more to light and to sight and form. And Kapha types tend to look towards their nose or towards their tongue in the center, because they're accessing the state of information that comes from smell and also comes from taste. So you can see how you can, even by looking at a person's eye movements, predict whether they're a Vata, Pitta and Kapha. If you look up and to the right, that's the position of the eyes that strengthens the ability to create new visual forms, such as a creative artist would do. If you look horizontally and to the right, that is the kind of movement a musician or a composer uses when he is creating new sound forms or new symphonies. If you look to the left and horizontally, that's the same as looking to the left and down, recalling auditory memory. If you stare towards your nose, then you strengthen what is called olfactory memories. Olfactory memories are the memories of smell and fragrance that we have. If you stare or just have the idea that your eyes are pointing towards your tongue, that accesses what scientists call gustatory memories, the memories of taste. So you can see that just by holding the eyes in fixed positions, we can access different states of information that exist in our own awareness. As a result of doing this, we strengthen our memory, we strengthen our ability to recall things, we strengthen our attention span, we strengthen our learning ability. And we have done research in our laboratories that show that when people hold these fixed positions, they have what is called increased brainwave coherence on EEG. If you see the EEG, it shows a completely different pattern where the brainwaves have entrained with each other, where the brainwaves show a rhythmic relationship to each other. This feature is called brainwave coherence. And we now know from a lot of scientific studies that increased brainwave coherence is in fact a very important factor in learning ability, in strengthening our ability to learn, whether it's memory or whether it's accessing any other visual information. Multisensory experience improves just as a result of doing these simple eye exercises and holding these fixed positions. A Vata person usually has better auditory and tactile responses. A Pitta person usually has more visual responses and therefore accesses visual memory much more than any other form. A Kapha person accesses more the memories of taste and smell. But I think if we just do all the exercises, it takes 30 seconds to hold the eyes in one position and move the eyes through all these different positions. Start up left, then down left, and down and right, then up and right, and then horizontally to the left, and then horizontally to the right. And then look towards the nose for 30 seconds, then turn the eyes inwards and towards the tongue. And then finally, the last one is turn the eyes upwards and inwards, trying to look at the space between the eyebrows. And when you do that, then according to the ancient Ayurvedic tradition, what you do is you open up what is traditionally the third eye, which is the eye of intuition. Intuition is heightened awareness. It's just accessing information that normally people don't access. But after all, if consciousness is the field where all information is present, then you just access a little more information, then you become, by common standards, intuitive. Intuition is nothing but heightened sense of awareness. So doing these fixed positions allows you to improve all aspects of learning, all aspects of memory, ultimately makes for a richer, fuller, better life, and also a multi-sensory experience. So by replicating these eye movements, we strengthen those abilities, which are there anyway, spontaneously. So if you understand that matter or structure is the final thing. Before matter is function, before function is intention, and before intention is consciousness. And from consciousness comes this whole thing. They say the eyes are the mirrors to the soul, the windows to the soul, because eye movements always reflect what's happening in consciousness. The next sensory experience I want to discuss is the experience of taste. After all, that's one of the most enjoyable experiences in life. When people get underweight or they get overweight, the reason that happens is they've stopped enjoying food. If we enjoy food, then we'll never have a weight problem. In fact, I'm going to suggest a few techniques that if you follow these techniques, they have to do with eating awareness, you'll never have a weight problem, ever. So these are really very simple things that one does to maximize one's enjoyment of food. Note these simple techniques of eating awareness. The first one, whenever you eat, no matter how much or how little, doesn't matter, it could be 1 scoop of ice cream, or 1 peanut, or 1 sip of coffee, anything. Whenever you eat or drink anything other than water, make a rule that you're going to sit down to do that. So always sit down. Preferably, there should be a chair and a table. Don't eat when you're standing. Don't eat when you're driving. Don't eat when you're walking. Don't eat when you're speaking on the phone, etc. Why would you want to? After all, eating is an enjoyable thing. Might as well do it in an enjoyable manner, so you get the maximum out of the experience. Number 2, when you eat, don't do anything else. In other words, it's best not to read a newspaper, or watch a television program, or read a book, or try and do a crossword puzzle, or watch the evening news, or even listen to music. Because you want to get the maximum out of the sensory experience of taste when you're eating. That's what makes it enjoyable. Rule number 3, eat when the stomach is empty. That is, there is no remnant from a previously eaten meal in the stomach. Because that too would interfere with the enjoyment of food. See, what we're doing with all these very simple rules is we are maximizing the enjoyment we could get from the experience of eating. Now, according to basic rules of physiology, it takes approximately 4 hours for all the food to leave our stomach once it's there. Now, in a Vata body type who's hyperactive, it may in fact be shorter. Or for a Kapha body type, it may be longer. The food might just sit there for 4 to 6 hours. Generally speaking, though, all we do is place our hand over our stomach or our abdomen, and we can know whether there's food there or not, just by feeling the sensations of the body. And if there's no food, then it's all right to eat. But if there's still food from a previously digested meal, then we'd wait for the appropriate time to occur. In the beginning, this takes a little practice and may disrupt your meal schedule. But in 3 or 4 days, it adjusts itself so beautifully that you'll find that hunger sensations come at the appropriate times. These are built-in responses. Rule number 4, do not put food in the mouth till the previous bite has gone into the stomach. It's such a simple thing to say, but go to a restaurant next time and you'll see that people violate this rule all the time. You can see all the mush in their mouth as they speak and eat at the same time. You should wait till the previous bite has gone to the stomach. And you shouldn't speak when the food is in the mouth. You should speak only when the food is in the stomach. That's another rule to observe. If you just follow these simple rules of eating awareness, you maximize the enjoyment you get out of food, and also your satiety level, the level in the brain where satisfaction is registered, has another threshold. Most people who have weight problems, they seek more intense stimulation from food simply because they do it unconsciously. They're dumping food into their stomach as if it was a garbage can. So as a result, it takes much longer for that satiety level to be reached. And therefore, they eat inappropriately. Now, one of the simple rules that I give my patients frequently is that for your first helping, take about 2 cupped hands full of food, the equivalent of 2 cupped hands. This will fill up about 2/3 of the stomach, leaving about 1/3 for digestion. If after that you still feel hungry, it may be genuine hunger, which means that you haven't eaten enough, or it may be just a memory. If it's just a memory and force of habit, all you have to do is wait for 5 minutes before you take a second helping. Frequently, those satiety levels will reach a certain critical threshold, and if you just wait for 5 minutes, the hunger will dissipate. You're not fighting the hunger, you're not manipulating it, all you're doing is waiting 5 minutes for the second helping. That's all. You should get in touch with the experience of comfort and discomfort in the area of the stomach. And at the point of comfort, you stop. If you go beyond the point of comfort, then obviously you're violating a simple rule of eating awareness. Why would you want to? It disrupts the feeling of energy. If you practice eating awareness even for 1 week, you will feel so much energy coming into you from the experience of eating that spontaneously you will want to follow these rules afterwards. Because the experience of energy gets a bit addictive. You get used to feeling so good, so energetic, that you don't want to violate it. You go to the range of discomfort in the stomach. First, there is a slight discomfort, then you feel tired, then you feel sleepy, and if you really violate it, then you feel quite sick. Many times, people will notice that even though they practice eating awareness, they have very strong cravings for certain types of food. And they can't resist those cravings. Now, according to the principles of Ayurveda, if we have very strong cravings, inappropriately strong cravings, in that we eat always to the point of discomfort, then we may have an eating disorder. But the etiology or the cause of the eating disorder has to do with, again, loss of ability to enjoy food. Traditionally, all food has 6 flavors to it. And what happens is, if your taste buds are not experiencing all the 6 tastes every day, then that causes imbalance in the body. After all, we have these taste buds for a certain purpose. The 6 tastes are the following: sweet, sour, salt, bitter, pungent, and astringent. It turns out that our taste buds are distributed in a certain manner. For example, the tip of the tongue is highly concentrated for sweet taste. The back of the tongue for bitter taste. Sides of the tongue more receptors for sour taste. The surface of the tongue more receptive to salty taste. And then the two other tastes that I mentioned, pungent and astringent, there are very few receptors for this. And that's why pungent and astringent tastes are in fact quite characteristic in that even a little bit of pungency has a lot of effect on the body. Also, sweet taste, even a dilution of 1 in 200 can be detected. A salty taste can be detected in a dilution of 1 in 400. A sour taste can be detected in a dilution of 1 in 130,000. And a bitter taste can be detected in a dilution of 1 in 2 million. And therefore, you can see that these tastes are in fact protective because most poisonous things are extremely bitter. The taste buds can detect that even in a faint dilution of 1 in 2 million. So nature has built in these very protective mechanisms, and also if we listen to the taste buds, then we'll see that we start enjoying food, the distribution is appropriate for our body types, and spontaneously there's balance in the body as well. One way to sensitize the taste buds is to swish a teaspoon of sesame oil in the oral cavity, in the mouth. This makes the taste buds much more sensitive. One can just swish it around gently for about 2 or 3 minutes and then spit it out and just wash the mouth with plain water afterwards. This lubricates the taste buds, makes them much more sensitive. And when we have more of that experience of delicacy in food, then we tend not to overeat because satiety levels are reached very easily. And basically, people who tend to overeat, they have what is called a high flavor threshold, in that they need much more intense stimulation from food because their taste buds are dull. So let's go over these 6 tastes, because what we see in our society is people concentrate just on 3 tastes: sweet, sour, and salt. Classic example, French fries and ketchup. In fact, think of any fast food and you'll see that it is sweet, sour, and salt. So what we do is, even though we have taste buds for all the 6 tastes, we constantly expose ourselves to just those 3. As a result, the body gets nutritional deficiencies. The animals in the forest don't have the vaguest notion of what the US Surgeon General said was the minimum requirement for calcium or zinc or whatever. And yet, animals don't get nutritional deficiencies. Animals don't get osteoporosis. The only animal, the only species that gets obese is the human species. And that is because we have lost our ability to respond to internal cues. We are always responding to external cues. And what I'm trying to do here is shift our attention so that we begin to respond to internal cues that nature has built into our systems. So if you constantly expose yourself to sweet, sour, and salt, then you get the cravings. Since you're used only to sweet, sour, and salt, you go ahead and take more sweet, sour, and salt. That aggravates the craving even more. The first thing to do when you have these cravings is to gently introduce all the 6 tastes, at least in one meal every day. So the 6 tastes are sweet, sour, salt, bitter, pungent, and astringent. When I say sweet, I don't mean concentrated sugar, which is bad for anyone. When I say the sweet taste, I just mean the sweet taste that is in things like breads, carbohydrates, rice, milk, cream, butter, even chicken, fish, meat. Their baseline taste is sweet. Sour is the taste that is dominant in things like lemon, in yogurt, cheese. Salt needs no explanation. Bitter is the taste of green leafy vegetables, spinach, broccoli, endives. All these have a bitter element to them. And then pungent is the taste of spices. For example, horseradish, or mustard, or just red peppers, black pepper, jalapenos, serrano, all these things. that add spice to the food. So any spice is the taste pungent. And astringent taste is the characteristic taste in beans, lentils, and pulses. So Mexican food, for example, when you eat beans or when you eat lentils or peas, that has a peculiar taste that's unique to itself. That is called the astringent taste. In other words, if your taste buds are exposed to all these 6 tastes, one meal, for example, where there would be some bread or rice, some green leafy vegetables, of course salt is there, some pungency in the form of some spices, and a little bit of beans or lentils, that would be the 6 tastes. Spontaneously the cravings would dissipate because the body is exposing itself to what nature meant it to expose itself to. So just introducing the 6 tastes to our food will immediately get rid of all the cravings. Now it turns out that different foods will have different effects on different physiologies. For example, if you're feeling hyperactive, then the vata pacifying food will cause a settling down of that hyperactivity. On the other hand, if you're feeling hypoactive, lethargic, lazy, tend to gain weight, then a kapha pacifying food will speed up the metabolism of food. Vata pacifying foods are sweet, sour, and salty. Pitta pacifying foods are astringent, bitter, and sweet. And kapha pacifying foods are bitter, pungent, and astringent. It's very interesting. You can, with a little bit of spice, a little bit of mustard, a little bit of horseradish, or a little bit of other spices, speed up the body's metabolism by as much as 25%. So a person who has a weight problem, if he just takes a little extra food in the form of bitter, astringent, and pungent tastes, that will alter his metabolism in such a way that it will make it easier for such a person to lose weight. There's no exercise that would increase the body's metabolism by 25%. And yet spices do that. That's why people start sweating, and that's why people have all kinds of reactions to spicy foods, because they speed up the metabolism. Now, it turns out that while these different tastes are affecting our physiology, they're also affecting our emotions and our psychology. Our language, in fact, reflects that. So we say sweet love, sweet friends, sweet children, sweet memories. Or we say bitter enemy, bitter argument, bitter pain, bitter disappointment, bitter regret. Or we say, I'm still smarting, stinging, burning from his pungent remarks. Or we say, so-and-so has an astringent or caustic sense of humor, a dry wit. So we can see that food and the various tastes have an effect not only on our physiology, but on our emotions. In the printed material that is accompanying this tape series, you will see a list of foods that have an effect on different body types. And we can see just by changing our food, we can influence our emotions, we can influence our body's metabolism, we can influence it in such a way that we can either gain weight or lose weight just by paying a little more attention to a different sensory experience of taste. The sense of smell is the next one we're going to deal with. Many times we are responding to smells at levels which are below the level of conscious awareness. The sensory experience of smell is one of the most fascinating because it modifies our behavior and influences our actions and our emotions without us even being aware of it. Many times we respond to a certain sensory stimulus of smell below the threshold of conscious awareness. One can improve one's sense of smell by very gently massaging the inner nasal cavity with just a little bit of sesame oil. So you dip your forefinger and your thumb in a little bit of sesame oil, and then you just rub the inside mucous membrane with that oil, and then you just sniff it once or twice. This lubricates the receptors in the nose and makes for a much more heightened sense of awareness through smell. There's a condition called anosmia, which is absence of smell, makes people much more vulnerable to disease. Not only just food poisoning and accidents, which is understandable, but even more to things like infections and so on. And 80% of the flavor of food is actually because of smell. If you block your nose, many times you won't be able to tell the difference between a banana or a potato or an apple, because the sense of smell and the sense of taste are quite closely linked to each other. Also, bonding between people, whether it's between a mother and her child, or between siblings, or even between a husband and his wife, or between two people, attraction and bonding, is influenced through smell. And in fact, smell is a very important factor in entrainment also. The word pheromone, P-H-E-R-H-O-R-M-O-N-E-S, pheromones, are hormones or packets of information that come in the atmosphere. And we're constantly emitting these. So vegetarians smell different than non-vegetarians. Smokers smell different than non-smokers. Even if they haven't smoked for a while, they smell different. If you have fear inside of you, you smell different than if you have exhilaration inside you. The smells are constantly reflecting this psychophysiological connection. There's a very interesting experiment that somebody did several years ago where they stressed some mice through electrical shocks. And then they expose other mice to these mice that have been shocked with electricity, and the other mice get very stressful as a result of smelling the odors that the stressed mice emit. So when you say, I smell danger, you're probably speaking quite literally, because intuition, as I said earlier, is nothing but heightened awareness. And when you say, I smell danger, you're in fact responding to that. Or if you go into a room where people have been fighting, and they've been arguing with each other, and you say, I went into the room and I felt the stress in that room. I felt the tension in that room. Your sense of smell registered the odors these people were emitting as a result of the tension, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, or whatever. As we improve our sense of smell, and as we become more aware of how senses are influencing our physiological responses, we become spontaneously more intuitive as well. Animals also bond through the sense of smell, and even human beings. A mother bonds with her baby in the first 2 hours after birth through the sensory experience of smell. You can now separate the mother and the child, and 30 years later, bring back an adult human being in front of the mother, and she'll be able to pick out her son out of the 5 people just through the memory of smell, and she does it spontaneously. It's below the level of her conscious awareness. Helen Keller, not only blind but also deaf, she could smell a storm hours before it became visible. Cows can smell a storm before it comes. Farm animals may anticipate earthquakes by smelling ions as they escape from the earth. Animals migrate, and their migration is very frequently through sense of smell. Fish, for example, go back to their spawning grounds as a result of the memory of smell. In California, they made a big industry out of this. What they do is when the fish hatch, they just put a little fragrance in the pool, and they let the fish out into the sea. The fish go out in the 7 oceans. When they're huge, big fish ready to spawn, they come back to the exact pool that they were hatched. What brings them back? The sense of smell. In other words, the sense of smell is a very powerful trigger of memory. Earlier, I was telling you about this experiment that Dr. Spector did, where he trained animals to smell camphor and destroy their immune system, to smell camphor and stimulate the immune system. What was he doing? He was inducing a conditioned response. But that conditioned response exists in our physiologies by itself. We have already linked memories and behavioral responses as a result of all the fragrances and odors and smells that we were exposed to since childhood. You smell a certain bakery and it brings back the memory of your childhood. You smell a certain fragrance, brings back the memory of an old romance, etc., etc. Now, knowing this and linking this to the experience of the body type is something that actually can be used for healing. Because there are certain smells, especially those smells that are linked to sweet, sour and salty tastes, that will pacify vata tendencies. So let's say you're a hyperactive person, you're an anxious person, and you have insomnia or irritable bowel or constipation or premenstrual syndrome, which are all the features of a vata that's gone out of balance. You can rebalance that with vata pacifying smells or fragrances. And these are basil, orange, rose geranium and clove. These are the smells that have this sweet, sour and salty odor to them, in a sense. So they pacify vata. On the other hand, you're a kapha person, hypometabolic, can't lose weight, tends to get high cholesterol, feels lazy all the time, retains fluid, etc. These can be influenced through the smell of juniper, eucalyptus, camphor, and marjoram. These smells will stimulate the metabolic rate. So they're very useful to use as aromatherapy, for example. And all you have to do is take a little bit of the oil that has those basic smells, and you can just rub it in some part of your body. Use it even as a perfume if you want. Or you can use the aroma oil in a dispenser, an aroma oil dispensers available in most health food stores, and these days even in supermarkets. So those smells will increase metabolism and also get rid of kapha disorders. It's interesting, a lot of our treatments for colds and congestions, even over-the-counter drugs, have kapha pacifying smells like eucalyptus. Pitta pacifying smells include sweet, bitter and astringent and cooling aromas, such as minty smells, sandalwood, smell of any minty flavor, or cinnamon or jasmine. These will have an effect on an aggravated pitta. So somebody who tends to get angry and upset and hot-tempered, then pitta pacifying smells will lower their blood pressure, for example, and in fact lower their heart rate. In general, minty smells are pitta pacifying, floral smells are both vata and pitta pacifying, and musky smells are kapha pacifying. So we can see that smells also can be used in very powerful ways to influence that part of the brain which is known as the hypothalamus. And this part of the brain is connected with a lot of autonomic functions. The hypothalamus is that part of the brain where sleep-wake cycles are regulated, where sexual urges are regulated, where appetite is regulated, where body temperature is regulated. A lot of these things that happen spontaneously in our body, the thermostats, so to speak, for all these are in the hypothalamus, which is this part of the brain, which is also called the brain's brain. And this part of the brain is directly connected with the smell receptors in the nose. So we can see how this knowledge of vata, pitta, kapha, the body types, can also influence responses in the body. Now, again, in the printed material that you have, you'll find a list of all the smells and for which body type they are most appropriate. And you can use those fragrances either in perfumes or as aroma oils to burn, or even as oils to gently massage your body with. The next sensory experience I want to discuss is the experience of touch. It turns out that our skin is a very active organ biologically. It is alive, it breathes, it gets rid of toxins, and it self-repairs. But most importantly, what scientists are finding out is that the skin is the richest source of both hormones and also of immune cells. Now, a whole new range of therapies may emerge because of the fact that the skin is one of the richest sources of all the hormones that we can find in the brain, in the hypothalamus, anywhere in the body. We can also find them in the skin. So when we stimulate the skin, we can cause literally a shower of healing chemicals into our bloodstream. One of the most important of these are growth factors or growth hormones. Now, if our skin is the richest source of growth factors, then we could cause these growth factors to be released into our bloodstream by simply stimulating the skin. Like the other organs, it is also a seat of emotions. When we refer to emotions very frequently, we call them feelings. When we are deeply moved, we say we were touched. We describe situations as sticky or ticklish or thorny. These expressions all have to do with sensations in our body. Therefore, the experience of touch or sensation linked to a thought is really what an emotion is. Once again, we can influence emotions and feelings and desires through our skin as a result of the release of these hormones. When rats, for example, rat mothers lick their puppies, growth hormone levels in the puppies go up. When dogs lick their puppies, growth hormone levels go up. There's a condition in children called psychosocial dwarfism, where the children don't grow and their growth hormone levels are very depressed. If you give them injections of growth hormone, nothing happens. But if you touch them and stroke them and cuddle them, then growth hormone levels go up as well. So, one of the things we recommend to all our patients is that they give themselves a daily massage. And it's very simple. All they have to do is take, again, we use sesame oil. The reason we use sesame oil, because most research has been done on sesame oil. If you rub sesame oil between your toes, you'll never get athlete's foot. If you rub it in your hair, you'll never get seborrhea or dandruff. If you rub it over your skin, you never get seborrheic dermatitis, and in fact, it's extremely useful for early psoriasis. If you swish your mouth with it, your taste buds get much more lively. So sesame oil has some unique properties. It's also bacteriostatic in that it doesn't allow bacteria to grow. It also never gets rancid, and it also gets absorbed through the skin. So we recommend taking some warm sesame oil, maybe 4 or 5 tablespoons full, and gently doing a total body massage. You can start with your head, then rub it in your face, and then rub your chest with it in gentle strokes. Rub it over your abdomen, rub it over your extremities, moving circularly over the joints. And the whole procedure takes about 5-6 minutes. And then following that, you take a shower. But you do it every day. And even if you do it for 2 or 3 days, or even if you do it once, you'll notice a different sense of energy and buoyancy that you haven't experienced before. And why does it come about? It comes about as a result of the release of these growth factors and growth hormones into the bloodstream. We are now in the process of doing a study, but there's early evidence that in post-coronary patients, patients who've had heart attacks, if after the heart attacks they receive massage in the coronary care unit, they can cause a release of growth factors into their bloodstream, which will open up coronary vessels and also open up collateral blood vessels, increasing the blood supply to the heart. Now, if you had a drug that did that, of course, it would immediately generate millions of dollars in sales. But you can cause the same release of these growth factors through your skin by giving yourself a massage. It doesn't have to be vigorous. We recommend that you use the oil because the oil gets absorbed and then actually causes physiological changes outside. But even if you don't use the oil, it makes a big difference. Just rubbing the sesame oil from head to toe, different parts of the body, for 5 minutes before you take a shower, and you feel that sense of energy and buoyancy throughout the day. In Ayurveda, there are certain points in the body that are called marma points. These are junction points between consciousness and physiology. For example, the place between the eyebrows is a marma point. If you gently massage that with oil, then that will bring about a state of calm, restful alertness. and will bring about certain changes in physiology also. If you massage the soles of the feet, that will induce sleep. In fact, if you have a cranky child who is very irritable, all you have to do is gently massage the soles of the feet with warm sesame oil, and as you're doing it, the child will fall asleep because it stimulates the sleep center in the brain. If you massage the area overlying the heart, that's another marma point, that has a very important effect on emotions such as anger and impatience. If you massage the area over your stomach, that influences your appetite, gets rid of false cravings. These different points are known as marma points, and they are very effective in bringing about certain changes in our physiology. The skin is the largest organ of our body. It weighs about 6 to 10 pounds, and it's about 16% of our body weight. One of the most important things to realize is that touch is about 10 times stronger than verbal or emotional contact. So touch is a very effective communicator. When you want to communicate with somebody, if you touch them and there's some caring implied in the touch, that is a much more potent communicator than words. Of course, Vata people respond even more dramatically to that than others. So, in summary, I'd like to say that just like there's a minimum daily requirement of any sensory input, there's a minimum daily requirement of the experience of touch. And we shouldn't be afraid of touching each other. We shouldn't be afraid of expressing our emotions and our feelings in relationship through the experience of touch. Because touch has a very much more powerful influence on our physiology than any of the other sensory inputs. So, through the 5 senses, we can see how we can influence this internal pharmacy that exists in us. And with the use of this internal pharmacy, we can improve the immune functioning of the body, we can improve our memory, we can improve our attention span, our learning abilities, improve our sensory experience, make it much more vital, make it much more vibrant, make it much more alive. And when that sense of aliveness comes into our physiologies, then we feel healthy. Because health is not just the absence of a disease, it's a joyfulness that should be inside us all the time. It's a state of positive well-being, which is not only physical but emotional and ultimately even psychological and spiritual. When we feel like that, when we feel one with everything, we feel that lightness and buoyancy inside us, then we experience that state of dynamic non-change in the midst of change. And that's what balance is. It's flexibility again in the midst of change. The more flexible we are, the more adaptable we are, the more creative we become, and the better we are able to function in life. I would like to mention a few things about the Ayurvedic approach to the treatment of any addiction. The Ayurvedic approach doesn't force things on you. It gently allows your body to choose what is best for it. Because in fact, the body is always making the right decisions. Sometimes we override those decisions by not paying attention to the decisions that the body has made. And the key ingredient to the treatment of any addiction is to culture the value of what I call silent witnessing. Silent witnessing means observing without judgment, observing without evaluation, observing without analysis. So we get rid of labels, definitions, descriptions, analyses, evaluation, interpretation, or judgment. We just simply observe. And when we do that, then spontaneously changes come about. Let me give you a technique, for example, for somebody who would like to stop smoking cigarettes. The first thing I would tell such a person is do not try to give up smoking. Hard-minded determination just sets you up for failure. Nicotine is addictive, as is the habit of reaching for a cigarette. To end these habits, you have to retrain yourself as unconsciously as you started. So what would I tell a patient who's trying to give up smoking? I'd say, keep your cigarettes with you. The strategy of throwing away cigarettes seems to make sense, but it only leads to panicked trips for more and the embarrassment of begging them from friends and strangers. Notice the automatic cues that make you reach for a cigarette and dissociate yourself from them. This point is very important. Most people light up automatically on cue. For some, the cue is picking up the phone. For others, it's turning on the television, or starting a conversation, or ending a meal, or having a cup of coffee. So you probably know the cues that you are used to. And what you should do is just dissociate the act of smoking from these usual cues. So if you feel like smoking, go outside, sit down by yourself, and just like when we were eating, don't do anything else, just smoke the cigarette. Don't be speaking on the phone, don't be drinking a cup of coffee, don't be doing anything that you usually do when you smoke. And before you start, just gently put your awareness in your whole body. Ask your body if it wants the cigarette. And the body will usually recoil even at the idea. You ask your lungs, do you want to smoke? And usually the lungs will make a sound. Something like that. As soon as you ask your body that. But even though you ask your body and the lungs reject it, and you really want to smoke because you're addicted to the memory of the experience, then go ahead and smoke the cigarette, but do it consciously. Be just aware of all the sensations that are occurring in your body, in your throat, in your lungs, in your body. Don't evaluate those sensations, don't judge them, don't interpret them, just be aware of them. And if you do this every time you're going to smoke, then slowly you'll see that the body keeps rejecting this cigarette smoke, and after a while you'll notice, even immediately you'll notice, that your smoking habit decreases from, say, 2 packs a day to 5 or 6 cigarettes a day. And as you continue practicing awareness, non-evaluative awareness, with the act of smoking, gradually the body completely rejects the cigarettes and you lose your desire. That's the way to get rid of addiction, to lose the desire spontaneously. All the simple addictions that people have can be handled in the same way. We do not fight a temptation. The easiest way to avoid a temptation is to give in to it. There's some truth to that. Give in to it, but do it consciously, and do it with full awareness, do it non-judgmentally, be aware of the sensations in your body as you do it, and every time you do it, the body will send out signals of comfort or discomfort, and you will slowly start responding to those signals, effortlessly lose your desire, which is the key thing. Silent witnessing is the key element here. What you're doing is you stop behaving like a bundle of conditioned reflexes that's constantly being triggered by people and circumstances and situations and things. Instead, for the first time in your life, you begin to act instead of reacting all the time. The ability to act instead of reacting all the time comes from the ability to stand back and become a silent witness of the whole process. And there's no evaluation in that witnessing. It's just a simple observation of the process. Why does anyone do anything? I'm asking you a very simple question. And the reason is that they believe that it will give them pleasure or happiness. So ultimately, the only reason for anyone to do anything is that they want to experience either a pleasurable sensation or they want to experience happiness. Happiness is the goal of all goals. And an addiction is nothing other than the linking of a certain stimulus with the interpretation of happiness or pleasure. But you've done it unconsciously in the past, and then you're stuck with it. How do you change it? You dissociate the link between the experience of pleasure and the stimulus. And how can you do it? By replacing the experience of pleasure with a stronger experience of pleasure. So what we do for these hardcore addictions in our clinics is we really bathe them in the experience of pleasure through the five senses. We give them luxurious oil massages every day, long ones. We teach them how to meditate. We teach them music therapy, aromatherapy. We just saturate the senses with the experience of pleasure. They become so used to that they don't want to disrupt it in any case, under any circumstance. They don't want that experience to be overshadowed by any other experience. It's a method of first uncoupling the memory with the pleasure and then replacing the pleasure with another memory. So next time they reach out for that cocaine or heroin, spontaneously the memory of pleasure comes that they have experienced before through other things, and they resort to those other things. Ultimately, your body is just the place your memories call home. Memories create the physical body. Memories continuously reincarnate themselves as the physical body. Your taste buds change every 6 weeks, but they don't forget the difference between sweet, sour, and salt. Your skin cells change every month. They don't forget the difference between hot and cold. Your DNA changes every 6 weeks. It remembers the entire evolutionary history of mankind. So memory is quantum mechanical. It's non-material. And yet it incarnates itself or expresses itself or manifests itself as the physical expression of the cell. When I see a lung cancer on an X-ray and compare it with, say, a lung cancer from 3 months ago, am I actually seeing the same cancer? No, because the raw material that makes up this cancer is completely different from the raw material that made up the cancer 3 months ago. I can get rid of it, I can bomb it with chemotherapy or radiation, or take it out with surgery, but unless I influence the quantum fluctuations that make up the memories of that cancer, I'm not really going to cure it. So if I want to cure a disease, I have to change the cellular memory of the disease. And that doesn't come by manipulating emotions. It comes by, in fact, transcending the emotions, transcending all thought, and becoming the silent witness of the process. Having dealt with the whole notion that the physical body is a result of fluctuations of conditioned responses based on previous memories, I think the key to curing an illness is to get rid of the memory of the illness at a cellular level. Recently, there have been some very interesting articles in the medical literature. For example, an article just appeared in Lancet, which is a very prestigious medical journal, which says that heart disease is reversible. Now, this would be completely alien to our old concept of the body. If you have a blocked artery, the only way you can get rid of it is to bypass it surgically, or use a drug to open up the artery. But this study, which just came out, studied a number of patients, 82% of whom improved in that their arteries actually opened up after 1 year of practicing certain lifestyle changes, such as going to a diet which was more compatible with vegetarian lifestyle, such as doing certain exercises and doing meditation. The introduction of meditation, exercise, and diet actually opened up the blood vessels. What is important about this is that it's showing us that nothing in the body is permanent. That even though we think of an artery as blocked and think of it in mechanical terms, actually we are recreating that blocked artery in every second of our existence. It's the memories that are doing that. Change the memories through certain changes in our life, and then the artery opens up. Also, the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California is compiling a list of what they call spontaneous regressions and remissions in cancer. They have a list of about 3,000 cases of cancer, well documented, where at one time the patient had cancer and now they don't have it. And what happened? Did they mood make, think themselves positive into that state of being? No. they had a deep insight that immediately switched the memory bank, and they replaced that memory with another memory. And that memory, that trigger, was what was responsible for the healing response. I'll tell you one very fascinating story about one patient of mine that is really amazing. I'll call the patient Bob. He's a young man, about 35 years old. And a few months ago, about 10 months ago, he was repairing an antenna on his roof. Actually, he was doing it for a neighbor. And he picked up a wire, which he thought was a dead wire, but it happened to be a live wire. And there were 12,000 volts of electricity in that wire. And these 12,000 volts of electricity immediately went through his body, and they would instantaneously kill anybody. They cause something called ventricular fibrillation. In fact, when people are electrocuted, that's the amount of voltage that is used. So he was electrocuted, and he must have died instantaneously. He fell from the roof, and it was about 30 feet distance, and he happened to land on the ground, miraculously you might say, or coincidentally, or whatever word you might want to use. When he hit the ground, he hit it at the right impact on the right part of his chest, with just enough impact at the right angle to start another jolt of electricity that brought his heart back from ventricular fibrillation into a normal rhythm. In other words, you might say he died, technically, and then as he landed on the ground, technically he came back. He didn't have a functioning heart, now he has a functioning heart. In any case, the jolt of electricity that went through his body burnt his entire thigh, his right thigh, as it exited from the right knee. And they wanted to amputate his leg, but he was so grateful for this gift of life to nature, God, the universe, whatever you might say, that the moment he would recall the extraordinary circumstance of his gift, so to speak, he would experience in his body an exquisitely blissful sensation. Just the memory of his coming back, so to speak. And any time he experienced that, and he put his attention on his lower extremity, he would experience some tingling over there. To make a long story short, in the course of 1 year, or little less than 1 year, he has regrown the muscles of his thigh that didn't exist there. He has literally created, out of that quantum mechanical field of energy and information, an entirely new limb. And how does he do it? He does it through a transformation in memory. It's just a shift in his consciousness. In this case, it happens to be spontaneous. Ultimately, therefore, the healing response is triggering something at very deep levels of awareness, those levels of awareness that are responsible even for cellular memories. You have to get rid of the cancer, then exorcise the ghost of the cancer. Now that sounds esoteric again, but by the ghost of the cancer, I just mean those quantum fluctuations in that field of energy that give rise to that physical expression of cancer. I had a patient with breast cancer who had metastases to different parts of her body. She came to the clinic, and what we did was replaced her experience of discomfort and pain and agony and fear, all of that, by the experience of pleasure, by the experience of love, by the experience of comfort in the body. And through all these techniques, through sensory stimulation basically. A lot of massage therapy was also involved. Massage therapy is one of the most important aspects of this, because it causes the shower of these chemicals into the body as well. Well, in any case, what happened was that within a few weeks, the pain that she was having disappeared. The discomfort disappeared, and the fear went. And as the fear went, she started feeling much better. She started moving around. And she couldn't even walk before that. She started going swimming. She called her doctor. She said, "Guess what? I'm feeling fine." And he said, "Well, let me examine you." He did some x-rays. And of course, the cancer was still there. So he said, "Don't worry. it's all in your mind, it will definitely come back. Now, as soon as she heard that, the fear came back, and with the fear, the pain came back. And with the pain, the cancer got worsened also. So here, if you understand the model correctly, you'll realize that a shift in awareness is the first change. This lady, by the way, has a happy ending because she again restructured her state of awareness, lost her fear, lost her agony, lost her anxiety, lost her sense of discomfort, and subsequently the cancer also disappeared over a period of time. She also learned transcendental meditation, which is a specific procedure to quieten the mind and experience more abstract levels of thinking, and then finally to experience pure silence in the mind. When you experience pure silence in the mind, then the body becomes silent also. And in that field of silence, the healing is much more efficient. What you have to remember is, when there's disruption or imbalance, the change first occurs in awareness. You feel uncomfortable. You feel that sense of discomfort. So you go to a doctor, he examines you, he does all blood tests, everything, and he finds nothing. He says, there's nothing wrong with you. Well, that's because he's entrenched in the superstition of materialism. Why did you go to the doctor? Because you were feeling uncomfortable. The change in the level of awareness always precedes the physical change. So too, when you get better, the sense of comfort and the loss of fear precede the change in the physical expression. And the key ingredient in getting well is that loss of fear. That loss of fear, that experience of comfort, that experience of pleasure with the body, the experience of wellness, just that feeling of wholeness, which is non-verbal but very strong, causes a shift in the quantum fluctuations that finally result in the physical expression of health. So, if we want to change the printout, then we have to change the blueprint. And what's the blueprint? It's the interpretations that we've locked ourselves into as a result of conditioned responses. That's all it is. And once you become aware of the conditioned response, and you can witness it non-judgmentally, that's the first breakthrough you've made. So you don't need to manipulate it, you need to become its silent witness. In the mere observation of it is the beginning of its dissolution. One way of witnessing an emotion is to witness the physical component of the emotion. Uncouple it from its physical component. Let's say you're driving a car and somebody cuts you off, and your usual response is that you immediately get angry. And you get upset, and you get turbulent inside. And that happens day after day after day. These little incidents, of course, build up, and that is reflected in your physiology. All those adrenaline molecules, those cortisol molecules, all these angry molecules that are eating your stomach up. There's a saying that an ulcer is not what you ate, but what's eating you. So, how to get rid of that emotion? Well, next time you have the emotion, witness the physical component of the emotion. Because any emotion has two components to it. There's a thought and there's a physical sensation. How do you uncouple the two? Just allow your awareness to settle down on the physical discomfort and be aware of the physical discomfort. And spontaneously the anger dissipates. Normally people just act out their emotions. They're not even aware of the physical discomfort till afterwards, when they have the headache, or they get palpitations, or they get heartburn or something. At that moment, to allow your awareness to shift to the experience of the sensation in the body that accompanies the emotion, allows for silent witnessing of the emotion itself. When he cuts you off and you feel angry, there's a component of that anger that expresses as, say, heartburn or a tension in the chest. Be aware of that tension. See it, feel it, and the emotion will dissipate. You're feeling the sensations in your body. You get angry, feel the sensations in the body, the anger dissipates. An emotion needs both components. It needs the thought, it needs the physical sensation. If one of them is missing, the emotion isn't there anymore.